How are you?
I'm very good considering what the world we're in right now. We're good.
I
I'm
know.
actually weird time, right?
A little, a
You
little.
think? I think.
How sweet, fresh meat.
Why do you think werewolves, the legend of werewolves, the history of werewolves makes such good comedy?
Why did it make such a good? Well, that's so funny you say that, especially as a kid. Oh man, this is a layered answer. I was like an underling kid, an underdog, I should say. A chubby, friendless kid with a big imagination as a kid. So my love for horror had everything to do with like seeing myself in the underling kids or underdog kids take on some supernatural sort of force. And werewolves represented the monster within, like the ability to channel the monster within to take on those kind of forces. So I don't know, I guess in comedy, I just, as a kid who grew up watching and loving movies like Monster Squad, Wolfman's Got Nards,
Hmm.
I think somewhere between the association of the inner animal and the kind of cartoonish nature of them, there's an inherent sort of humor there, the thrashing and kind of monstrous quality therein. But they otherwise terrified me. I otherwise did not associate them with comedy. I think Silver Bullet scared the crap out of me. It continues to this day.
Good movie, first of all. Yeah, I mean, because I remember
Yeah.
two of my favorite werewolf movies are The Howling and of course and American Werewolf in London, which both are pretty freaking hilarious. If you think, I mean, yes, they're
Yeah.
scary, but there's a lot of humor. What inspired this tale? This taking on the video game? How did you get involved with this?
Well, Mishna Wolf was the one to basically take on the material or present an idea based on the IP of the game at Ubisoft under the Women's Film and Television Fellowship. And she felt it appropriate to create a story about a divided town, and the sort of social deduction of finding out who truly is at fault for these murders. I got involved because the script was sent to me via Vanishing Angle, our producers,
Hmm.
and Mishna would kick me for saying this, but I was reluctant to like pitch on what I perceive to be a video game movie.
Yeah.
They have, in my perception, they have kind of a bad reputation, right?
Not just yours,
Uh,
my friend. Not just
that's the
yours.
thing. That's the thing. And so I was reluctant, but from page one, it felt like an Amblin-esque, kind of a reverent Coen Brothers movie. I mean, I felt the town. I grew up in a small town like that. I felt the kind of character engines and everything else. And so I related to it on a personal level. And I also immediately saw the towns I grew up in. I saw the Hudson Valley. I had just shot my first feature, Scare Me, up there as well. And I thought, well, we got to do it there, A. And B, this could be a wonderful opportunity to do, performance-oriented comedy with perhaps some practical effects. Is exactly my jam.
Yeah. Now, it. I want to say one thing, and I think it's a little more serious because this is a really funny movie. I want to make sure that people know this. Really hilarious. But one of the things that you do, which I actually mentioned to a couple of your actors, is that you take on the divided country that we are living in right now and do it in a way that is not offensive to any party, not offensive to it.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a refreshing take without demeaning anyone, without insulting anyone. How do you, because I know that's in the script, but you also have to do that as a director. How do you do that? How did you make that so fair and I guess a balanced look at what we're going through?
That's an awesome question. I mean, ultimately, this has to do with being strong in your convictions, whether they are, I want my town, my home to remain unscarred, like to remain the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's better to be nice than be not nice. I want to be a good person, and I want people to do good things for me, and I want to do good things for good people. Um, and at its heart, like, regardless of where you fall on the political spectrum, like, we all want to be a good neighbor, I think, or at least have good neighbors,
Hmm.
to live life uninterrupted. And I think as curmudgeonly as perhaps we might perceive the local hermit, who wouldn't love brownies? And so as far as translating that for my actors, it was kind of giving the freedom to find these characters, obviously presenting the tone of the movie to them. I was very sort of communicative, as you have to be as a director, getting 11, 12 people on the same page. But reining them back when I felt like anything kind of went too far. You got to be a barometer for your troop, right?
Hmm.
And then telling them to kind of push it otherwise. But it was all from like a grounded sort of emotional place. You're talking about the power of being good, the shittiness of being evil, if I can say that. That kind of thing.
You can say whatever the fuck you want. We're on JoBlo now.
Hey.
Now,
Oh shit.
there you go. Let's fucking A, man. I want to say, like, and I really, what I like about your style and what you brought to Scare Me, what you bring to this is you bring a very refreshing look at horror without kind of cheapening the comedy, without cheapening the horror. There are some legit moments here, but with this cast, god damn it, you picked a good cast. How did you
Yeah.
piece all that together, man? This is great.
Well, it's so funny. I'll continue repeating this sort of this initiative I had. I had first of all, I had a no assholes policy. So I told my casting director, I said, first of all, Gail Keller and Ubisoft, I said, I don't want anyone to come on set that might, be a bit too strong reputation wise of a bully.
Mm.
And B, I did want actors who ideally had worked together before, like George Basil, for example, who played Marcus. George and I go way back. We've known each other since the College Humor days, way, way, way back. Even I'd say even further back than that. And
No.
George is such a great sort of disarming presence. So I went, well, George. I want George to come in the middle of nowhere. He's great. He'll make everyone feel welcome. He's funny as hell, charming, all this stuff, magnetic. And then you kind of branch out, for ask the actors, hey, we're going to be in the middle of nowhere. Who do you want to play your spouse? Who do you want to play your partner? And Ubisoft gave me the freedom to sort of to let my actors do that. So George said, well, have you heard of Sarah Burns? And I was like, Sarah Burns, oh my God, she's hysterical on Barry, as one of 3,000 examples. So we get Sarah Burns aboard. I say, Harvey Guillen, who would you like to play your husband? And he said Cheyenne Jackson. I go, oh my God, I wouldn't have thought of Cheyenne Jackson. I saw him in All Shook Up when I was, a teenager, and loved him, thought he was so cool. And so here we got Cheyenne. So also what you're building as a family, your actors have someone, that they have inherent chemistry with, or that they've wanted to work with, and that, you kind of build out from there. And then, I mean, Sam is our leader, our producer, our, hero protagonist from the get-go. And so, this, you can't ask for a better human being to kind of firefly in, moth to the friendly light, the rest of this ensemble. And that's kind of how it worked out. And also, I mean, someone like Michael Chernus, just as, a sort of standalone example, that's someone who's been a comedic hero of mine, an actor hero of mine, who has a career I've wanted to emulate as an actor for a long time. I said, I want to work with you. What can we do? Who do you want to play?
Oh my gosh. That's absolutely brilliant to cast a movie like that. That's how, you're bringing in the good, and because you're spending all this time basically trapped together in a snowy location.
Yeah.
What was obviously you did this with Scare Me. What is the positive, the pro about doing a film like this where you're all kind of stuck together with a bunch of people?
Well, inherently, you've got to face each other, live with each other, that you're building chemistry inherently, kind of whether you like it or not. If you have to see them in the lobby in the morning, or when you take the van home at night, that kind of thing. So that's pretty great, but again, it's beyond that, it's knowing that these actors not only perhaps have to some degree like live performance experience, which helps, inherently you've got to be inherently collaborative, A, or B, just again, like good people. Like, I know you're like a good person. I know you don't carry a gun and fall very harshly on one end of the political spectrum, as an example.
Mhm.
You know, and so from there, what you have is a cast that ends up going, oh my God, I've never had an experience like this. This cast is so loving. This cast is so giving. Everybody is so kind of cool. And that's also my role too. It has a lot to do with my role as a director. It comes down from the top. If I was a D-bag, it probably would have felt differently if I was sort of antagonistic, but I wouldn't have it any other way than have kind of an open-armed sort of troop experience, and that's what we ended up with. It worked out well because this is about people being trapped together.
Well, the thing is that you're definitely not. And you can say douchebag. You could go
I
all
mean,
out, man.
I wanted to say dickbag, and I was like, well, it's a
Oh,
little early. Let's see what time.
I like
Yeah, I mean, my
dickbag.
time.
Dickbag
10:09. You could
works.
say dickbag. You don't want a dickbag on set. I mean, I don't know.
That is that every time I talk to someone about you specifically, that is what people they're like. This is just a lovely human being, just excellent to work with. What and that translates on film. You can see with this cast, there's a genuine like camaraderie here. What was the most challenging thing? I think it's challenging just to talk about the film in a way because you're dealing with the title Werewolves Within and what that encompasses. You don't really want to tell them too much because it's not quite what werewolf fans will expect, I
Mm-hmm.
guess you could say. Is that tricky to kind of let's promote this film? It's called Werewolves Within, and if you don't know the game, you're gonna be in for surprises.
Well, it's not terribly tricky. I mean, when you really look at it, ultimately, I think folks will be satisfied. To
No.
certainly to a degree, it's like you're going to get what you think you're going to get. A, but B, this is a movie about the monster within us all. If we're going to be
Yeah.
like really kind of blunt about it, and so no, I don't think there's anything too tricky about kind of relaying much about it otherwise.
Well, it's funny because I'm watching it thinking, is this what I think it is? Is it what? And I like that kind of energy. Now, one of the things that you do deal with when you do deal with the horror, and there is some really legit good horror, legit scares here. Is that easier for you because comedy is hard as it's in itself to direct comedy is hard. Do you find the horror easier to direct or do you find them both equal?
The comedy is inherently easy for me. There's a beat in this movie that's full on a visual joke where I said we're going to cut to the profile of this actor for one line, one beat, because I know it will hit. And people will probably know, whatever. When it comes out, we can all talk about it. And everyone's kind of going like, really? But then when they see it together, they go, oh my God, of course. This totally works. And that I'm a barometer for. I was born with that in my bones. The scares are such a whole other thing. I've watched so much like Carpenter. I'm like, God, what is it about, Halloween that is so constantly dreadful? A piece of it, as I've, continued to study it,
Oh
for
wait.
example, is the music. Yeah, exactly. There you go. I just found out just that the face and the knuckles. Anyway, that's a whole other thing. Can't believe the Easter egg. But that chemistry, literally, like speaking as a chemist, is still difficult for me. I totally was like, not a duck to water with Scare Me insofar as like some of the, some of what I intended to be, sort of bigger scares. It's more sort of inherently dreadful. But here it felt a pinch easier by the circumstances. The setup. This is intentionally about, in some ways, creature attacks and the like.
Mhm.
So, you kind of find what might work there, but yeah, building scares are tough, and I'm still a student of it, and I'm fascinated. I want to keep going, but I also want to continue to make stuff in the genre that's like genuinely funny and legitimately scary. So if I can do both without getting caught trying to be funny and getting caught, trying to, pull the cat jumping out of the cupboard thing, cheat scares, then I'll be okay.
What now? You mentioned Carpenter, and I love the fact that you mentioned Carpenter. I'm a fan. Uh, what are some of your favorites besides Halloween, like The Fog, Prince of
Oh,
Darkness? Is there anything that sticks out?
Criminally, I have not seen Prince of Darkness. Criminally, I've seen and I also like recently. I also didn't even know that Toby Hooper directed a movie called Life Force.
Yes.
Whole other.
And the Funhouse. Don't forget the Funhouse.
That's the Funhouse. I've seen the images from. I'm like, oh God, why didn't I? But yeah, Carpenter. I've always loved The Fog. Christine really fucked me up. I think as a kid, like I think specifically when the bully grabbed the protagonist like by the balls, like and you know, so Brian Fuller talked about like not only what wonderfully queer movie it was, but also just like that relationship between him and his car and his deterioration into madness. There was something about that movie that's quite dreadful that messed me up. It's also stunning, but The Fog is absolutely killer, and The Thing is great, of course. Controversially, as a kid, I loved Memoirs of an Invisible Man. I know he hated making it, but I was young,
That's fair. That's Starman too. I mean, the guy has such an amazing career.
Yeah,
although
amazing.
You need to see Prince of Darkness. I mean, that's just that it's one of his most underrated. Yes, please write this down. See Prince of Darkness. So what's next for you? We got a little bit of time next. What's next?
Well, I got a few things going on. I'm working on something with a horror novelist who I'm in love with and been a fan of for some time. So trying to work on a TV series project with him, and I do want to take a swing at the sci-fi genre. It's something that's sort of, as irreverent as Werewolves Within, but feels like sort of, the more irreverent, kind of slightly darker, sweeping sci-fi film, like my swing at that. So I'm working on something in that kind of world. And if anyone would give me a swing at a take on Darkman, that is my dream. My dream is to play in the Darkman space, because we need a horror hero.
We do, and that would be. I think you would be a perfect fit for that. I think that.
Thank you for saying that.
Are you?
Are you? Favorite movies.
Yeah, I was gonna say that movie's a one that I think is a bit underrated, because I think it's one of those that wasn't really respected when it came out, but now it is.
It was positioned to be kind of as Mick Garris says, it's like a gutter genre film. Like I remember it kind of being you sort of start watching it, or you look at the VHS and you expect it to be a lot of like naked breasts and gruesome gore, but it's not. It's kind of like it's a darkly comic superhero movie about like the Phantom of the Opera, basically. And I think there's a really awesome a version of it that can take everything a bit further with keeping that that zip and originality. And I'd be stoked to play in that sandbox. So if you know anybody,
Dude, it was awesome. This was a great conversation. Thank you so much. I'm a fan, man. You're really a talented guy.
I'm a fan of you. Thank you.
Thank you, brother.
Really appreciate it.
Hey, Harvey, how are you?
Jimmy, how are you? Good.
I'm good. So, I want to talk a little bit. I mean, I did a couple of interviews already for this film, and I'm so impressed with the level of talent involved. How did you get involved, and what was your reaction to the script?
Well, I actually got involved because the director had a mutual friend of mine, and that friend texted me and said, "Hey, I'm talking to my friend. He's directing this new comedy. It's really great, and I think you should be a part of it. Can I put you guys in touch together?" And I said, "Sure. A friend of yours is a friend of mine." And we just got on the phone, and he sold me on it. He just sold me on the whole project and made it sound like he had a vision. He knows exactly what he wants, and this is what he lives and breathes. Like, this is his genre. So I felt very comfortable and very safe in his hands to come on board. And I guess the rest is history, because here we are.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing about, for some bizarre reason, I talked to Josh about this as well, horror movies, especially werewolf movies, tend to work really well as comedy. And you've worked on a certain vampire show, which you had a part of, so that pretty well. What was the vibe on set? I mean, obviously horror there's a lot of fun, I think, when doing a horror film. What was the vibe on set for you?
It was just fun. It was just every day was just going to play with an amazing ensemble. Like, this whole cast is uber talented. It's just like the stuff that was, you read the script and you already know or have an idea of what it's going to maybe look like or sound, but you have no idea until you get to set, and the choices that the actors make on the spot and what they bring and what the work that they've done on their own, that you have no idea until it's presented. Like, wow, that's even better than I even imagined. And that was the case with this project. It was, everyone was so great at what they were doing that you didn't want it to end. You were just like, I mean, literally we became like a tight, small family. It was just like, it was incredible. We worked together and we lived together. We were living in cabins, and cooking dinner in the same kitchen every night, and hanging out by the fireplace. So, I mean, it could have gone very south. And I think Josh did a very good job of casting people that I think he knew would blend well with each other, because all you need is like, one bad apple and, it's a horrible experience. But this was not that. Like, this was like, everyone was wonderful and lovely, and we could have shot for another 2 months. It's just like, that was the vibe.
Yeah, it sounds like really a communal experience, which that's hard to find. It
is hard to find. I think that's so rare, and so when you take it, when you come across it, you take it. Just like, this is great, because we've all been on projects where, like, sometimes it's just people are in their own world. Like, it's like people, and so the chemistry is different and the vibe's different. You come up with this idea of like, this is the energy I bring, and it's like, that's not the energy we accept. You know what I mean? It could go either way. I've been fortunate enough to be, part of this ensemble and cast that's just so welcoming, loving, and other places that I visited as well. Like, Zoe's, such a welcoming crew, and magicians. Like, so I've been really lucky that I haven't had too many bad apples, so
that's a good thing. Well, speaking of chemistry, let's talk about you and Cheyenne. This is just a fun pairing. You two are great together. Very believable. It's a lot of fun. What was that experience like, working with him? And he's really funny in this. So I know you can do funny, but come on.
He's so funny. And I think, from talking to Josh about when he asked me, who do you want to play opposite of you as your partner? Because once I signed on to do the role, he talked to me and said, well, who do you want to play opposite? And I said, well, what are we looking for? We're looking for, charismatic. We're looking for charming. We're looking for funny. And he's like, yeah, all of that. And I was like, well, how about like Cheyenne Jackson? Never worked with him before. I've, known of his work for obviously years. And we were lucky enough to get him, and he was on board, and we met and we just hit it off. And he's a musical theater guy. I'm a musical theater guy, which was the ongoing joke. Was I went to school for musical theater, and I just barely got to practice that on Zoe's extraordinary playlist. And so I was like, we were just living off, in stories, and there's a world of, dialogue that only like musical theater nerds know. And so it was just talking like that. And so we hit it off really well, and he's so funny, and we just bounced off each other so well that, I'm just now glad to call him a friend.
That's amazing. I think that's one of the things is Josh did mention that you suggested Cheyenne. I just assumed you were buds, honestly, from what I saw on the screen and from what Josh told me.
Everyone assumes that. Everyone really, and that's credit to, working with an actor who's so giving and vulnerable and willing to be that open. I think us together is not the traditional queer couple that you see, and we wanted to make that point that human beings out there who happen to be queer don't necessarily fit the mold of what traditional Adonis or, the gay culture is, with six-pack. And Cheyenne's very good looking, so he's obviously like a really tall, leading man, handsome guy. But the idea that love is, love, and it wouldn't have to necessarily look a certain way, so it was very important for us to portray that and to make it realistic. And you believe that these people, they're in a relationship. They really are.
Well, that's something I think is also in the script too. And I mentioned, something I also mentioned to Josh is that I'm a little mushy mouth there. I found it so interesting that in these very divisive times, let's say it as it is, it's very hard to find a balance between making one group the enemy, one group the hero. This film does an interesting job in that it kind of makes fun of all of it, which is hard to do in a way that doesn't come across as pandering or condescending or kind of a negative thing. This is fun. It makes you forget about that. Did you kind of feel that when you were kind of digging through these characters, creating your character? Did you feel that?
Yeah, I felt that, by really honing in on what these characters were with Joaquin, like the idea that everybody has different wants and needs, right? And when left to our own, devices, humans sometimes, when given the choice, make the wrong choice, just because we're all driven by different wants, and desires, and sometimes greed. And what's important to me may not be important to you, and what's important to you may not be important to Joaquin.
Hmm.
And so we are driven by that. And so a social game like this, really is what it points out how we are easy to target someone for our own personal vendetta. You know what I mean? Because
Hmm.
it benefits us. And so that's what I loved about the script, was that every single one of these characters had something to gain that was important to them. No matter how ridiculous it might sound to you, it's important to them. And those are the extremes that someone's willing to go. And that's where the werewolves come out in all of us, is where our buttons are pushed, and we, each one of us, have our limits.
Yeah, I love that. I'm watching the film and I'm thinking of the title the whole time, and I'm thinking, hmm, is this what I think it is? Is this which is another plus, because oftentimes a movie that comes up, it's a horror movie, it's a werewolf movie, or it's a zombie movie. You know damn well what it is. This movie kind of plays with the idea, and it's a little more. There's a little more thought, a little more cerebral than somewhere deep in the comedy is exactly what you said, Werewolves Within, the
Yeah,
title of the movie,
the
which,
monster could be closer than you think. You might be searching and pointing fingers, but sometimes you might come across your reflection and realize that you've been looking at yourself the whole time.
mhm,
So
mhm.
that's where the real message lies.
That's a good message too, and it's very true. What was the most difficult moment for you? Because you have, dude, I love this character. I love what you and Cheyenne do. I think it's a lot of fun. What was the most difficult, or what was the most fun part of filming this movie?
I mean, I would say for me, the funnest part would be the rapport, just bouncing off these characters, one another, and the way they talk to each other, and the quickness of it. There's scenes where we're talking to Michaela's character, and it's Sam and Mills and I, and there was a scene or a take that we did that was so funny, but it was too long, and that scene needs to move quickly for the just
Uh,
the rhythm of this, the movie. But we just did a scene just for fun, and it was so funny, and I was like, this will never make it, but it's so fun, but it's so good to have that for us. Like, we had this moment where the memory will live on, and unless you were here, you had to be there, and we were.
nice. No, mention going back a little bit to Zoe's. What a cool concept. What a cool show to be involved in. What is the difference between doing something like that and doing something like Werewolves Within, or is there a difference?
Absolutely, there's a difference. Maybe not in the sense of unity, because it does take a village to make each one of these projects work. And surely
Sure.
with the musical, down to the choreography by Mandy Moore, who's incredible, and such a amazing cast, with Jane Levy at the head of that. And it's just it was a lot. It was different. It was different preparation. It was different intensity. Going to Zoe's was more of a going to dance rehearsals and vocal recordings of your song. So it was like going to musical theater camp, and every minute was accounted for. You did not waste a minute. If you weren't dancing, you were on set filming. If you weren't filming, you were recording a song. If you were recording, you were dancing. Like, it was like every minute is accounted for. And you always feel like you're doing a production, because when you do a musical or a show, you put it up in a couple of weeks or maybe even months when you're in school. I remember rehearsing for like 2 months just to perform a show for 3 performances.
Yeah.
So you're like, wow, I can't believe we rehearsed all of fall, and now here we are in winter. And then that's just that's part of the process, which is nice and nostalgic. But in musical theater for TV, the turnaround's much quicker. It's like you have a week to shoot this episode, and you have to learn the dances, the singing, and so it moves really quickly. And with Werewolves, it was the timing. Has comedy is all like timing and rhythm, and every one of these musicians were incredible with their instrument. Like, they literally, every one of this orchestra member in our cast of Werewolves Within is so great with their instrument that there was not a flat note in the bunch.
I agree. I agree. Now, obviously, it's a little challenging to take genres and mix them together, like comedy and horror. But weirdly enough, they both are very similar, and they're both kind of heightened reality. Are you a horror fan? Do you get into that kind of thing?
I do. I'm also a scaredy cat when it comes to that, because I grew up with like, Mexican folklore and like the Llorona and like, Cucuy, which was like, to this day I don't know what exactly it is, if it's human, monster, alien, uh werewolf, like, so the idea that it does intrigue us, but it's also like the unknown, right? So it's the
Yeah.
unknown that kind of captivates us, and sometimes it's a thin line, because the unknown is what scares people and makes you terrified, and that's why you attack it, and you stand off from it, or you make it a target, because it's unknown, right? So horror has always been the story of outcasts, really, or you think of it like Frankenstein being chased down by the village, because you didn't understand it, you just didn't know it, and you understand it. And so I think once we stop and take a breather, we realize who the real monsters are.
Wow. No, I love that you brought up La Llorona, and I butchered that. I know. But how early on were you aware of that kind of thing? Like, did your parents use it to scare you?
No, but I knew at an early age. I guess I was an old soul, because at an early age I just knew that sometimes what was different wasn't necessarily bad. It was only scary because people would put a layer on it, And
Hmm.
being, a person of color, being queer, being a person of size, all these things were all things that people would strike against you,
Yeah.
And there was the unknown. So if it's unknown, oh, they're queer, and it's like a whisper of a, or whatnot. It's not that that it's a bad thing. It's that it's made into a bad thing by the people who feel uncomfortable being educated on it. And so that's where the monsters develop. That's where X-Men, X-Men is a group of outsiders. They're mutants, but they're not. They're just different, and you are scared of that. And so you isolate them into their own category. So again, asking the question, who's the real monster?
My God, it's such a deep question too, because we're at a time when it's so easy to kind of get lost in the hyperbole of whether it's social media, whether it's whatever's going on film, whatever's going on in politics. Has it changed, like the climate changed for you in any? Do you see it getting better for people of color, people in minorities? Do you think things are changing?
I think we're moving in the right direction. I think slowly but surely. We're definitely not where we were, decades ago, but that's not saying much. The idea that only decades ago there was, turmoil, and it continues to be, maybe not in the same amount, but there was and is, and unfortunately continues to be. And until we can live, in a world where that's not even the topic of, conversation of like, how do you, it's like everyone's living their life and not living their life in fear. That is the goal.
Well, Harvey, it's about our time to wrap up, but it was an absolute pleasure. I love this movie. I loved your performance. You're a charming guy. It was absolute pleasure talking to you.
Well, thank you, James. Thanks so much.
Cheers, man.